Now you have something that picks up the animal, and there's no marks on the animal at all from a claw or strap, and then puts them back. But they don't drop them. So whatever picks it up, place it back down.
Holy mackerel, that can't be aircraft. There actually is a large unidentified object circling the Earth at incredible speed.
Naturally, we are very curious to know where it is you come from.
Cattle mutilations. So when we talk about evidence for the UFO phenomenon, especially lately, it's been pilot videos, radar, craft videos, the advent of AI. It's everywhere. What a lot of people either don't remember or have forgotten about are cattle mutilations. In the 70s, talk about tangible evidence. You had 2,000 pounds of dead carcass to analyze. No blood, precision cuts, incisions, no predator tracks, even if there's snow around, and no predators would eat that carcass. So for me, and we'll get into this a little bit more, I had some experience with an uncle of mine who in the 70s experienced the same thing. Having said that, we've got the modern day king of cattle mutilation investigations with us today, Chuck Zukowski. Welcome.
Oh, thank you very much. Would you say I was a king? Or?
I said king. I use
okay.
that.
Okay, that's fine. I'll go for that. That's not a problem. I know that there's it's going to be interesting because next week my wife and I are going to be in London. So, they have a king over there. So then there'll be two. So,
Yeah. Well, listen, we'll send you a crown once we get her.
Yeah.
But let's start with this. And we'll get into, Chuck's been on Alien Highway. He had his own series, which I loved. And I was pissed when they canceled it. He's got a book about the 37th parallel, a whole theory there, and numerous things in between. But let's start with your first cattle mutilation investigation. Describe that.
Okay, while you were talking, I was looking around because I was pulling up some information on my latest investigation I could talk about too. But yeah, I think the first one was the Mike Duran one. It was 20 some years ago. When I was working with MUFON at the time, I was assistant state director with MUFON. We had just moved out from California to Colorado. We spent 24 years in Colorado. Now this is my second year now in Texas. But almost immediately, like the first year I'm out in Colorado, I heard about the cattle mutilations. Now I had researched them when I lived in California, except they really didn't have any around the area where I lived, because I was in, Huntington Beach. I was in Orange County. But I had the opportunity to go out and look at some of the investigations, or at least some of the animals and carcasses that were left over from some earlier ones right before I'd moved out. Now, when I was state director, I was part of the STAR team, which is their rapid response team. And at the time, it was being financed by Robert Bigelow. And we can go back that whole debacle later. But so the very first STAR team investigation was going to be one of my investigations, which was the cattle mutilation, where a UFO was actually seen too around the same time. And that was the Mike Duran mutilation. But the interesting thing about mutilations is that they've been around for a long time. Now, here in the U.S., we're talking since 1967 with Snippy the horse. Actually, Snippy wasn't really the name of the horse that was mutilated. With the name of the horse was Lady. The reporter got the name wrong. But so Snippy kind of stuck, even though that wasn't the name of the horse. But the interesting thing is since 1967, we've had over 10,000 cases of mutilations here in the U.S. And out of all 10,000 cases that were investigated by law enforcement, no one's ever been found and who committed these cases and gone to jail or tried or anything like that. So basically, out of all the cases that we've investigated here in the U.S. by law enforcement. They've never found the culprit. No one's ever been tried, convicted. They've never found predator evidence that the animal, how the animal was killed either. So it's really interesting what's going on with these mutes. And being a former law enforcement, I got a taste firsthand on how law enforcement deals with the mutilation cases. The interesting thing is, and it's not going away, and it's been going on for longer than since 1967. I've had so many different opportunities to work with our Native Americans, especially with Alien Highway. I got to work with Ute Native Americans when we were in Utah investigating the Skinwalker Ranch area, not the ranch itself, the whole area is hot, and then Navajo and Apache, and they all have their own stories through their ancestors of animals being mutilated, so it's nothing new. I think one of the first mutilation cases that I researched was back like in 1890 in Missouri. So when people say, or the skeptics or the debunkers going, well, it's our government. Well, really? No, not. We're going back to the 1800s. And then when you talk to the Native Americans, they have stories too. Now, I can't say that, our military hasn't been involved, but I've never for once thought that the military actually did it. A few of my cases, military helicopters have showed up after the fact, about a week or so afterwards, like as if they were running their own investigation. And they are. I later found out that, they are running their own investigations. A couple times I beat them to the investigation. And so it's kind of, well, actually, I know. Okay, so is there a part of the government that's been running their own investigations? Well, we all know there is now. There was always talk about it in the past, but in 2017, when we found out the Pentagon was funding Robert Bigelow to run investigations, and Robert Bigelow was the entity that was in charge of the STAR team for MUFON. So that cattle mutilation that was being funded by Robert Bigelow turned out was being funded by the Pentagon. So that's pretty cool.
I didn't know that Bigelow funded the STAR team investigative unit for a period with MUFON.
Yes, yeah, he did. And because Colorado MUFON was they had a MUFON, I was assistant state director. I got firsthand information what was going on. Now, we knew when Bigelow came in, we knew that, or at least I knew. Some of us kind of figured out that he wasn't using his own money. It was almost as if the money was being laundered through him, for us to run our investigations. And they were supposed to give us equipment and and all this other stuff. And how it turned out was, and we got reports from other state directors in MUFON, that when we got these investigations came into MUFON, if we thought they were STAR team worthy, and STAR teams are the more experienced investigators are part of the STAR team, so they're the ones that would roll on these investigations. So we would have to submit the investigation to Robert Bigelow, to his team, because he was funding it, right? And then he would approve it, and then once he approved it, then we could run it. Well, that's what happened with the Mike Duran case. We had to submit it for approval. They approved it, and then I went ahead and ran it, and I had about, I think it was 3 or 4 people that I brought in from MUFON to be on my team, and we ran the investigation, and I sent samples to Colorado State University Veterinary Lab and did a bunch of stuff, and it all came out of my pocket, right? Well, then after it was said and done, Bigelow denied it being the STAR team investigation, because even though a UFO sighting was involved, the craft didn't touch down. So that became one of his requirements, that there had to be some type of a physical craft there, even though the rancher saw a craft and the son saw a craft later on, that wasn't good enough. So it all came out of my pocket. I ended up having to eat the whole thing. And it was at that point is when I decided to go completely independent from MUFON. And shortly thereafter, I ended up leaving MUFON because I didn't need them to be in control of my investigations. If I was going to pay for it, it was going to be mine, and that type of thing. But so anyway, what we found out though during that whole time frame was some of the state directors in other states were saying that when they submitted within that 2 days, they found out that Bigelow was sending his own team. That's why there was like a 2 day lag. So we would submit the investigation. If it was really something cool that Bigelow liked, he had his own team that he sent there first to run the investigation. And then as they were leaving, he would approve it. So the MUFON would go. So MUFON became, sloppy seconds, so to speak.
So it sounds like Bigelow is not dumb. It sounds like he was saying, look, I want to investigate this. I'll put up some money and I'll have this investigative arm who gets firsthand reports, scout it. And then if it's cool enough, we'll just cut him out of it and we'll take our team in and check it out ourselves. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, exactly. And the MUFON still got to run their own investigation, but we weren't first on site.
Yeah.
Some of our guys would get there and they say, well, you were already here yesterday or you were already here 2 days before.
Oh, that wasn't us. Yeah.
No, it wasn't us. It turned out to be Bigelow's guys. Now, as it turns out, we learned in 2017 that it was the Pentagon that was funding Bigelow. So we always knew, or at least I always knew, that our government had their own team of investigators and they were using certain people. I mean, for gosh sakes, I was called twice by someone within our government about 8:30 at night, couple of years apart from each other. The first time I was called, it was on Roswell when I did a press release on finding debris at the debris field at Roswell. And on my cell phone, this was years and years ago, I get this call about 8:30, and the other person on the other line was very, very polite, male voice, and asked me some very specific questions about my investigations, wanted to know what I learned, and I told them whatever they wanted to hear. I mean, I'm not going to withhold any information. And then I said, if you have any other information, be free to call. Right? I'm not one of those guys. I don't want the government. I don't want someone to be on. I don't want to be on the bad side of especially.
Did they identify themselves as being with the government when they called you?
Oh no. But they at the first time. When we first had cell phones come out, all of our cell phone numbers you couldn't get. Remember that?
Yeah.
And but they had my number. But yet the only way that you could get our number was if you physically gave it to somebody. This is the very beginning. And then a couple of years later, they had called me, and about the same time frame, not the same. I can't tell you if it was the same voice because it was a couple of years later, asking me specific questions about cattle mutilations and what I learned and everything like that. So I always knew that MUFON was infiltrated by the government. It has been since 1969, I think. I can't remember. 68, I think, was when Project Blue Book ended, and 69 was when MUFON started. And the head of MUFON, the members that started MUFON, they were known as the Avery Group.
Mm-hmm.
They all had bird call sign names, so they couldn't be identified at first. Really interesting stuff. So, if you've been around long enough and you know all that history, of MUFON, how it started, I learned that, in my opinion, Project Blue Book never ended. It just turned into a voluntary group, and it kind of really made sense. You have this group that has volunteer investigators all over the United States, and not only what people within our government know if any type of UFO activity out there is being reported to MUFON, but if any of the activity was black projects.
Right.
And they would know that maybe this black project here, was seen or and maybe they better be more careful how they, do things. So I've always been very open to talking with anybody. And even with Alien Highway, we had a government informant help us with the Roswell episode, giving us some information. So I'm very open to working with them as much as they want, because I think, we're all looking for the same thing. We all want the same answers. And I'm not gonna. Yeah, I'm gonna help them because if I help them, then we're looking at disclosure a lot faster.
Yeah. Well, listen, if you're out there in the government and you pick up this episode, do you want me to text them your number, or you?
I'm sure they have my number. Yeah, they definitely got my number.
So let me run this by you. I had in the mid '70s, my uncle had a cattle ranch outside of Great Falls, Montana, a little county called Rainsford, Montana, and we'd go visit, and they're always like he would do cattle drives, and it was the coolest thing ever. I'm a little kid. He put me on the front of the horse, sit behind me, his German shepherds rounding up cows, and we drove cattle, and it's awesome. And then afterwards, they'd all sit around, we barbecue, they're drinking beer, and eavesdropping. I heard them talking about it was previous, I think, in the wintertime, cattle mutilations, and commenting on finding the cow in unbroken snow, no tracks, same thing, tongue cut out, laser surgical around the eye gone, jawline cut out, sexual organs cored out, udders cut, and no blood. And I'm a kid and I'm eavesdropping because I just wanted to see them, the grown men drink beer and stuff. And I'm not, it scared me, but it fascinated me. And then another gentleman there mentioned a big hairy type creature hitting his tool shed or looking in. And I'm thinking Bigfoot, right? So fast forward all these years, and I've always been into the subject, and I thought, did I really hear that? Or am I just willfully making this up in my head? So I call my aunt, who's the little sister of my uncle, and she was there. She was like, late teens, 20 at the time. And I asked her about it, and she said, "Oh, honey, it was terrifying." She said they were taking turns patrolling ranches with guns at night. She said, "Yeah, that all absolutely happened." So I was like, "Okay, that's wild." And so that was the mid '70s. I think the district attorney for Colorado in a documentary in the '70s, it must have been
75, 70,
yeah,
there.
said at that same time frame, this is extraterrestrial. And at the time, you had reports of craft, you had sheriffs reporting craft, you had these mutilations. What, in your mind and in your experience, what's different about a mutilation site that would be so noteworthy other than what I said? I mean, did you find radiation? Is there always like craft reported with it? And what are some of the wilder reports you've taken?
Well, first off, because I was a city boy, and as I was greenhorn coming into this stuff. Later, I had to be comfortable walking out in these ranching fields in between these 1,200-pound animals. I always went off the ranchers first. I would talk to the ranchers, and that was my first clue was, have you ever seen this before? Have you seen this type of death? Because this type of death, cows die of other causes too. And it might be viral or something else going on there. But it's when the rancher doesn't know how or why this animal is dead. And it scares them too. In some cases, there was one case where the rancher's wife wouldn't go outside anymore because they lost a couple of cows. So I would go off the rancher. These are second, third generation ranchers. And when they said, hey, something's going on over here. And what I've learned over the years, and a couple of the cases, the animals, I was able to pick up a high electromagnetic field coming from the carcass itself. And the first time I picked that up, my EMF meter was pinging. So it was reading well over 100 microteslas. The Earth's magnetic field is like 50. So I'm going. First thing in my mind was, there's a mechanical device, in that cow, a probe or something, or something, that they would do with abductees. But as it turns out, when I contacted the lab that actually designed the EMF meter, and I got to talk to one of the engineers, he explained most of the time what that EMF meter will pick up is residual, meaning that some very high energy force affected that animal. And what I'm doing is I'm picking up the residual energy from whatever was responsible for that animal death. So that I had picked up that a couple times before, not only on animals but in the ground too. And in some of my cases, the animal was lying in a very round ground depression. And maybe the ground depression was just, a little bit bigger than the animal. So I started taking soil samples, and I sent soil samples to the same lab that BLM would send their soil samples for New Mexico and Colorado. So I picked one that was a reputable one. And every time, not only in Colorado, but the samples we got from Georgia and then got from Illinois, Illinois. No, Kansas, excuse me, Kansas City, Missouri. The nutrients in the soil, the CECs, the nutrients in the soil were different. So I would take samples in the circle, and then I would take samples outside the circle about 20 feet, and just compare A to B. So the soil by the animal was less soluble. The cations had changed. The nutrients had changed. And when I started researching what would cause that to change, it turned out to be very high energy, like electromagnetic fields. And an EMF is just very high frequency radiation. So whatever caused the mutilation, now I have two cases. Now I'm picking up from the soil, the changes in the soil due to high EMF, and now I've picked them up on the animal itself. So now I know that some type of energy field. I mean, it's obvious to me. A lot of people will say, "Oh no, you're just saying that." No, I've got proof and I've got stuff, and I mean, it's documented that happens, that's responsible for the animal. Now, here's the thing that threw me later on. Now, what happens is the animal is picked up at location A, wherever they are, right? And they're taken to an unknown location B. They're drained of blood, and then they're mutilated. I know that for a fact because every sample that I've taken to a lab from mutilated animals, there was no hemorrhaging involved on the edges. So you would see the edge of the actual cut, right? The incision, that's the unknown incision. Then I would do a pie cut from that part of that unknown incision. So the part that goes into the lab, they could see, okay, what caused that unknown cut? Well, what did they use? And most cases, majority of the cases, it was more like very, very sharp scalpel type. One particular case, it was a serrated edge, but very, very smooth cut most of the time. But the interesting thing, there was no hemorrhaging, meaning if the animal was still alive and the blood was pumping, they would have saw that, but there wasn't. So the bottom line is the animal was drained of blood first, and I actually learned that from an animal that I actually took the whole carcass to the veterinary lab in Fort Collins, and the heart was collapsed, and there were some organs missing, the tongue was cut. But the heart was collapsed. So he says, yeah, it appears that the blood was drained out. Okay, so we know that now. So the blood was drained, then it was cut up. Now, for whatever reason, now this is at location B, which is an unknown location. Whatever reason, who's ever doing it, okay, they take it to location C, which is in proximity of location A, about maybe 50, 60 yards. So it's almost like they take it back to almost where they got it from. Now, you've talked to the earlier cattle mutilation investigators, even Linda Moulton Housel talks about this. Christopher O'Brien, who's not with us anymore, talked about it. Well, the animal was dropped. They dropped it from a helicopter. No, not true. Absolutely not true. No evidence of dropping at all. Matter of fact, when you see the animal lying there, there's absolutely zero movement of any of the limbs, even the head, nothing in the soil. You would see that. You would see some movement if something was dropped. So it's absolutely, that's the first thing when I see a cattle mutilation is I look for any type of struggle. If the animal is dying, it's going to try to struggle to stay alive. No struggle. It might as well just been a plastic cow or fiberglass cow, which is kind of funny. That's another story, but that was just put there. Now, what I found out though was how it was placed there. So here's something even more interesting, that sometimes the inside of the animal, the bones were broken. So the rib cage would be broken away from the backbone, or the femur or the legs would be broken, or the shoulder would be broken when it was put back down on the ground, because there was no bruising, there wasn't anything that showed that it happened before. And it happened. The first time I was thinking, oh, maybe that was the case. The animal fell over. But then the more I did, and the more we looked inside, that wasn't the case. So now you have something that picks up the animal, and there's no marks on the animal at all from a claw or straps or anything like that. Picks them up and then puts them back. But they don't drop them, because if they drop them, if you drop a dead animal, it's going to move. Right? Because it's still fresh, right? So it's not stiff yet. So it would move, and you would see scuff marks on the ground, but that's never the case. So whatever picks it up, when they place it back down, they don't drop it. So that it's almost just kind of figure it like it's an energy claw that picks it up and puts it back down. Now, maybe depending on, let's say it's a craft, okay, just for, because this is UFOs. Let's say it's a craft, and depending on the height of the craft from the ground would depend on how much energy that craft would have to use for that animal to put the animal back down. So in some cases, if it's close to the ground, it may not have to use as much energy, so therefore the animal is gently placed. If it's from a higher, maybe it has to be pushed down. But when it's pushed down back to the ground, that's when the bones break inside.
Gotcha.
That's what I've learned over the years.
So
really scary stuff too.
So 3 points almost. Point A, picked up. Point B, blood drained, organs taken, whatever other mutilation is, and then point C, where it's placed down either softly or sometimes not so softly.
Right.
And in where they place them back down, where that energy is used, you're picking that energy up around the area of the dead body.
Couple of times, not all the time, but a couple of times I am. And then a couple of times, well, maybe half a dozen times, you could see the impression in the ground. Okay. Sometimes I would pick the energy up from the soil, but when you would actually see the circle. So that's the other thing too. So why was a circle? There's a circle bigger than the animal. Why is there a circle there?
Yeah.
And then so it tells me that, I don't know, I'm just kind of, thinking about this. If there's some type of an energy that's either a colander or even a cone coming down, because people talk about being lifted up, into a craft during an abduction, and some energy is lifting them up, right? So if there's an energy force that's putting them back down, then that energy is hitting the ground is also causing the soil in the ground to change, the nutrients to change in that.
So with all that, I mean, to the untrained eye, it may look like cows just dead there, right? Initial brush. But when you have law enforcement, and then you have vets, and you've worked with them all, and you were law enforcement, how do they argue that that's not anomalous, that it's not predator kills? Is it almost that they want to turn a blind eye because they don't want to think it's an alternative, that it could be something we don't know about, or are they just not seeing what you're seeing?
Absolutely. Both cases.
Okay.
Okay, and I'm living proof. To all your viewers out there, it still works. If you type 3 words, you go into Google, just type 3 words, deputy fired UFO. That's all you got to type, and that's me. Just 3 words, I'll pop up. It had to do with a horse mutilation case, 2 horses that were mutilated. And while I was a deputy, I investigated. Now, as a deputy, I investigated, as an investigator. But unfortunately, a reporter in Denver that was there that I interviewed with, when she interviewed the rancher told her I was a deputy, which no one knew, except for the rancher, but I wasn't representing the department. Anyway, so that reporter went to my department and interviewed I guess it would be like the person in the department that talks to the press, right? The
Right.
PR person. Yeah. And they lied. This one particular deputy, who was the PR person for my department, lied and said that the case report said that it was a predator, it was an animal. Okay. That's not true. The case report said it was animal cruelty, and one animal cannot commit animal cruelty against another. The only mammal that can do that is a human, right? So she lied. She lied to, it was Fox News in Denver. So she lied to them. And then when they interviewed me, I said, oh, no, it's not a predator. There's no signs of a predator. Okay, now here's the case. Two deputies that I knew had gone there and had investigated that case. Now, certain sheriff's departments, depending on how big they are, if there's a lot of animal cruelty cases, they'll take one or two deputies and they send them off for about a week's class seminar on how to tell the difference between when there's animal cruelty, if it was done by a human or by a predator. Now, when these guys saw it, there was no way that they could see that it was done by a predator. There was absolutely zero evidence that a predator killed these two horses. There was marks, the cuts. Matter of fact, there was a dog that survived that had, and another horse that survived that ended up with marks on them, too, that survived. And so the only thing they could do to close a case, like most of the departments do, is they call it's animal. Well, it must be animal cruelty. It must be human. We just haven't been able to catch this human or whatever. And that's how they close it. They only have two options right now. It's either another animal or a human. They don't have the paranormal option yet, yeah, which we've been wanting them to do.
Right.
But they won't do it. Right.
Well, hey, do I have that right when I was saying the district attorney or the state prosecutor for Colorado? I forget which it was in the 70s, the one that after he talked to people like yourself, talked to law enforcement, talked to farmers, said this is extraterrestrial. And I think that prompted the FBI to get involved. And of course, there's nothing to see here. But do you know what his position was, who I'm talking about?
I think it was Congressman
Somebody.
There was two congressmen. There was one in New Mexico and one in Colorado. And basically, their constituents were going, hey, what the heck's going on over here? We're losing these animals. And so they're the ones that brought it to the attention and got the FBI involved. And it kind of pooped out. It kind of filtered away. They really didn't come to any conclusion. Basically, they said, I guess there must be some type of a predator there. But it never got concluded. And it still hasn't. Like I said, we know that they've been close to 10,000 cases. Actually, Knapp,
George
reporter
Knapp?
Yeah, he's the one that came up with the 10,000 number a couple of years back. And I didn't realize it was that much until the more I thought about it. For every case that I do, I find out that there was probably 3 or 4 other cases that happened in that area close. So all of a sudden, 1 comes into 5, 8 comes into 20, and so I can see how it can come up over the years that there's multiple cases.
So, cattle mutilation, worldwide phenomena, by the way. Mm-hmm. Brazil and South America, where there's a lot of cattle, same things happening there as well. So it would be tough for me to say the U.S. government. We'll get into theories a little bit here. We'll kind of start going down that rabbit hole a little bit. So theory-wise, when you talk about the government, like, why would you want to abduct private cattle when the government has plenty of land and could do whatever experiments they want with their own cattle and leave everybody the hell out of it and not create this whole mess, one? So then that leads me to the bovine blood theory, that bovine blood is the closest match to human blood, and therefore if a non-human intelligence that wanted to study us and was saying, there's value in taking this specimen, that's got almost the same blood type and doing those type of experiments on tissue and blood seems to make more sense than the government. But where are you at with some of your theories? And listen, we'll get into all this. He's got the 37th parallel is going to tie into this too. But what about just theories overall as to why a non-human intelligence is doing this?
No, I mean, that's a very, very good point, because when medical science was looking at in vitro fertilization, they were using bovine hemoglobin, right? And the medical industry came back, or the feds came back and said, hey, look, we're not going to make human babies from bovine hemoglobin. So when we get to the point where you can use human hemoglobin, that's when you can start doing this. But during World War II, I believe, they looked at using bovine hemoglobin on the battlefield. But then we had the Red Cross, so we didn't need that. And then I learned during Vietnam that some of the Vietnamese armies were using bovine hemoglobin on the battlefield. And the reason why you would use that, or bovine blood, is because you don't have to refrigerate it like human blood. You have to refrigerate human blood. Now, yes, that falls right into the theory of hybrids,
yes,
alien hybrids, right? But I've done horse mutilations, I've done goat mutilations, elk. I've done so many other different types of mutilation. Well, I guess it was a dog, horses. Let's see, what was else? It was goats, sheep. Of course, they're about the same.
Yeah.
So there's it's just not bovine. So now it's like, okay, if it was just focusing on, and it might, I mean, you could take that whole other scenario and say, okay, who's ever doing it just wants the bovine hemoglobin or bovine blood, but sometimes we'll do these other animals to throw us off. That could be. And I even had I wrote one blog years ago that said that it's all about the blood. Because back in like, what was it, I say 1868 or 69, the one in Missouri, the animals were still there, but they were drained of blood. It's like 3 animals were there. So it's always been about the blood. And so I had one crazy theory that, hey, maybe they're just cutting the animal up to make it look like it was a predator. Let's just say let's say it's an alien, all right?
Yeah.
Now, if it's an alien doing this, you got to remember that aliens wouldn't think like humans. They may not have the personality traits. They definitely won't have the way we think and the way that we theorize stuff, because we don't know how they think. They could be very robotic in the way they think and how they do things. Matter of fact, that's what a lot of the theories were about the Greys, was they're worker ants. You tell them to do something, they just do it. And they don't think about it, right? So that would make sense if you think about, okay, so they want the animal for the blood. They take the blood, and then they go cut it up to make it look like that a predator got it. Those stupid humans, right? And then we'll put the animal back where we got it from. So think about it out here. If someone steals your car, right, and they bring it back without an engine, it's worthless to you. But the registration, it's still registered to your name, so it's still yours. Yeah. So if you have this type of mentality from an alien that goes, hey, we just took what we needed, but we gave it back to you, so what are you complaining about? They don't understand the whole concept of the life parts of life and death. They just took what they needed and gave it back to you because they give you back your stuff. Almost like a 3-year-old.
Mentality. So I never thought about it like that. Like, why bring anything back? Like, just take it, and they would take what they need, and they could drop it anywhere, but they bring it back.
Exactly.
And so, and this, I don't want to go too far out on a limb here, but for me, the hybridization theory and what's associated with, seeing craft and the blood and potential grays, it almost makes me think that they want us to know in a way. Like there's always, people talk about there's always a message to be communicated. Now, I don't know, and then you go on to crop circles, and I'll ask you this. Have crop circles ever been in an area where there's mutilated cows, or have you even heard of a report like that?
No, but I mean, I did work on the Roswell rock investigation, which was a lodestone type of rock about that big that had the Littleton crop circle engraved on it three-dimensionally coming out of it, and it was polarized. And you could put the rock down on a table and put a magnet in the middle, and it would spin around.
So this rock you found at Roswell?
Yeah, well, I didn't find it. It was one of my investigations.
And it had a crop circle carved
Yeah, he found
on
it. Yeah, yeah, he was tracking some goats, and like, oh my gosh, his name just. Oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't think I was going to go there. I just drew a blank on his name. But if you look up Roswell Rock, you'll see that. And while he was tracking these goat footprints, he saw the rock embedded in some sand and pulled it out. Go, what the heck is this? And it took us a year. I say us because my sister helped me with that one. We spent about a year trying to debunk it, because Roswell Festival, is nearby, 40, 50 miles away from where the rock was found. And we wanted to make sure that it wasn't something you could buy at the festival, right? Because it's a popular crop circle. It's the Littleton crop circle on it. And we couldn't find any catalog. We couldn't find anybody that would. Yeah, and I even went down and checked the vendors that have been there and said, what did they sell? No, anyway, you could get them now since we did a press release on it years ago, but back then no one had it. So it was all kinds of different theories. But that particular area, my sister Debbie was with me at the time. We had a hell of a sighting while we were lecturing at Roswell. It was July 3rd, 2016. We had gone to that area where the Roswell rock was found. Just the area. We didn't hike way back to where it was found, but right off the 2-lane highway and parked there. We were just kind of messing around with our night vision, binoculars, and all kinds of stuff that we had. And something happened there. So that whole area seemed like maybe, I don't want to say it's like there's like a portal or anything, but it's very active. And I could tell you about what happened there later if you want, but I don't want to, get off topic here. So, again, were we going back to the blood, or you're going back to
the crop circles? Like crop circles. We're talking farms and cows. Is the crop circles? They ever cross pollinate?
There have been. I saw there was, and I didn't do it. It was in another state that someone said they found a crop circle, but it was underwater. It was under ice. But the more I investigated that, like fairy circles.
Yeah.
Yeah. So to me, if it was just a circle or a couple of circles, Mother Nature can do that on her own. So I have heard about crop circles here, but I've never been able to investigate them. Now, the difference between here in the U.S. and other countries is, at least in Colorado, if you go after someone's animals or you are trespassing on their ranches or their farms with the intent of vandalizing, you can shoot them.
Oh.
At least, yeah, here in Texas you can, in Colorado, because you have the right to protect, your animals, your livestock. So, yeah, you would never want to do it here in Texas. Yeah, they'll shoot you right off.
Yeah, same here in Florida, I promise you.
Yeah. So, but, in other countries, in the UK, that's not the case. They, pretty much all their cops out there. I don't know if they still don't carry guns or not. I'll know next week because I'm going out to London next week. But so for crop circle wise, I really haven't seen. The only thing I've ever dealt with was that Roswell crop circle. But not the closest I come to like any type of circles would be the circles that I found that the animals were lying in, and that turned out to be more of a
energy related or disruption. Energy. All right. Well, let me ask you this: in your investigations, have you ever? We're talking about cattle's getting abducted and mutilated. Has there ever been like the area that the cow was mutilated, whether it's a farm? Typically, it's going to be a farm. Have any of the people claimed abductions from the people living at the residence? in parallel to cows being mutilated?
None of my investigations.
Okay.
But UFO sightings, definitely.
Yep. So there's craft,
There's
cows,
craft, and
cows.
there's also what I call balls of light.
Yeah.
Now, the people have to understand, when you talk about UFOs, okay, there's a difference between UFOs and ghosts when it comes to orbs. Orbs are spiritual. They stay with ghosts. Foo Fighters, balls of light, that's UFO stuff. Totally different. One spiritual in nature, it's a spirit. The other one is a probe, like we would send probes out in outer space. And I've filmed these balls of light. I've posted them on my website and on my YouTube channel. We filmed them during Alien Highway when we were in an area. Matter of fact, it was so funny because when I had that TV show, my son Daniel was on my team, and we're walking with the eyewitness who'd seen these balls of light all over the place and UFOs, and his house was haunted. And there's a whole other thing between haunting and UFOs and aliens. They both have a commonality. It has to do with electromagnetic fields. It's really interesting stuff when you start looking at it. But so we're doing what they call the hero shot, and everybody has seen this. If you've ever seen these reality shows,
Sure.
where it shows the lead characters, they're walking, towards the camera, and they'll have someone with them, and and the whole time we had to try it like 3 or 4 times because my son and I kept laughing. We were, yeah, this is stupid, but that's what the Travel Channel wanted. So we had to do some, goofy things like that. But anyway, we're walking towards these 2 cameras, and these are very, very expensive cameras. These are called red. Just red cameras, right? And I guess they use them when they shoot Marvel movies, so they're really expensive, $70,000 with all the equipment on. And so both our cameramen had, basically checked these things out, from a company and using them for the show. So we're walking towards these 2 cameras. And we're being all cool and stuff. We get up and like, okay, fine, that's fine. And then both cameramen run over and goes, "You didn't see that? You didn't see that?" I go, "See what?" He goes, "You had a ball of light was following you right behind you." Well, how am I going to see if it's behind me? So as we were walking up, a ball of light was tracking us.
What location was that?
Oh, that was Missouri.
Yeah. I love that.
Yeah.
And you went back based off the 73 case initially, right, in that town in Missouri?
That was one of them. Yeah, was at Clearwater Lake.
Yeah,
Was that one? And then we were in Highland, Illinois, for that particular. And that's, I can go on and on and on, and all the stuff that we've learned. I know the difference between what can be a UFO and what can't be a UFO now. I learned that from the Highland, Illinois one. Investigation that we did on our no, actually I did that on Unexplained Files season 2. I did that one, not on Alien Highway. Unexplained Files season 1, I did a little blip on cattle mutilations on one of their episodes, and towards the end of my little blip, I mentioned my 37th degree latitude theory.
Yes, I wanted to touch on that. That's the 37th parallel. Tell us what that theory is about.
Well, so at the end of my little clip, I didn't get the whole episode, just a little clip about cattle mutilations. I was looking at a map and I'm going, yeah, these mutilations seem to be appearing on a 37th degree latitude. And it's kind of interesting, too, because you have the Dulce bases on 37th. You have Taos, New Mexico, where the Taos hum is, and you have the Area 51 and all kinds of different other things and other UFO sightings and stuff. And I would kind of mention that very, very briefly. Well, I got a call it was the Science Channel was in charge of the Unexplained Files TV show. And they called me up when they got approved for a 2nd season. And he said, "What's this about your 37th degree latitude theory?" And I said, "Oh, that's pretty cool. I'm still working on it, but it looks like it's da-da-da-da-da-da." And I'm doing a press release on that just on my website. And they said, "Well, can you send us some data on it? How much data?" And I go, "I got tons of data. I could probably show you. I don't know if I could show, but I had just, sheets of data with GPS coordinates of all these events on it, along with other possible military bases based on from people in the military and possible UFO sites. Dulce, New Mexico, right, the Dulce base and all that stuff." And I sent them all that. and they called back and said, "You want your own episode? Just your whole episode on the 30 on your 37?" I go,
Yeah,
"That's an
man.
hour episode just for me." And they go, "Yeah, you do it however you want to do it." I'm going, "Holy crap! Are you kidding me? That I can do it the way I want to do it." They go, "Yeah." So they brought in Raw TV. Raw TV was a production company out of England at the time, out of or London, I think, and now they're in the U.S. So I had these four British guys with me, and I got to pick where I wanted to go and who I wanted to interview. I wanted to interview Bob Lazar so bad because of Area 51, but whatever reason, he had got away from
Yeah.
being on TV for a while. So I interviewed John Lear from
Yeah.
Lear Jets,
Oh yeah.
and John Lear knows Bob Lazar, and he had he was also had the Dulce Papers and all that kind of stuff. And John Lear was just awesome. And then and when that aired, it was because of my interview with John Lear. Now, John told me this later that Bob Lazar decided to go public again, even though he didn't want to talk to me on my show or my episode. He decided, well, you guys talked about me, John Lear did, and he's friends with John Lear, so he decided to go back out and start lecturing stuff again. But so anyway, that 37th parallel it's the more I got involved in it, the more I researched, I realized that, okay, so across the 37th degree latitude across the U.S., you can hit every aquifer that we have under us. Now, that's really important because my theory is that aliens that are visiting this planet are using hydrogen. Why? Because this planet is just loaded with hydrogen. I mean, it's so stupid, too, because here in Texas, we have a drought right now in the area that I live. And I'm going, why do we have a drought when 72% of our planet is covered with water? And we have more water underground now. We learned that out a few years ago than we have above ground. So there's more water underground that's in all our oceans above ground, in all our lakes, which is even more bizarre. So we could be pulling water from the ocean and desalinizing it and putting it in our lakes and water. I mean, because cruise ships do it every day. That's how they that's where their water comes from. But so I want to make sure that I didn't get off base here. So anyway, so you can pull hydrogen from water. It's really easy to do. If you get a 9-volt battery and you put a wire, you attach a wire to each side. Don't touch them, okay? And then strip the ends of the wire off on both sides. Tie them to a 9-volt battery. Take the other end and gently put them in a cup of water. All right. Don't touch them together, and don't touch the water because it'll shock you. And then almost immediately you'll see this gas come up. And that's pure hydrogen. So you use electricity or current to pull hydrogen from water. And what is hydrogen? Is H2O, right? So then you just have oxygen. So hydrogen is very flammable, right? We know that from the blimp that blew up. Yeah.
Hindenburg, yeah.
The Hindenburg, yeah. At the time, there was they were blocking the Germans. We were blocking the Germans from selling them helium. Helium was being mined in Texas. I'm trying to pull all this out of memory, and so they were using hydrogen. Well, hydrogen ignites really, really quick. Our sun uses hydrogen through fusion to give us ultraviolet A and ultraviolet B rays, right? So that's how we get our light, is from fusion from our sun using hydrogen. Our space, and they found this out within the past 4 or 5 years, that space there's more hydrogen in space than they thought. So there's lots of hydrogen in space. So if you have a UFO coming over here, let's say they can use hydrogen. I don't want to say it's for propulsion, it could be for anything else, but they could actually use that source from inner space, deep space, as they need to get here. And then now they're on this planet, we were just full of hydrogen. Now here's something else interesting. So it's really easy for them to pull hydrogen from water, so a lot of the bases would be underground, right? Or in the ocean, because they can pull it from the ocean too. You can also pull hydrogen from our petroleum products, from crude oil or methane or anything. You can pull hydrogen from that. So if you want to look for UFO bases across the U.S., look for where there's a little clutter of UFO activity, and then check to see what's underneath that UFO activity in that area. If there's an aquifer there, or if there's petroleum there, and you can find maps on the internet that show you where all our petroleum reserves are, not reserves, but basically where they pull petroleum or crude oil out of our for our oil derricks and stuff. You can find all that. So, and I'm just kind of going back to what I was thinking about before I started about this. So if you want to find a basis, and you lock it in, if you pick up high levels of electromagnetic field, like maybe they're processing the oil to get hydrogen, they're processing the water. There is a couple of places where we found here in the earth, or actually in the U.S., where there's been some high levels of electromagnetic field, and there's been petroleum underneath it, or aquifers, and that might be, hey, maybe that's where they're getting it from. But the interesting thing is, the tic tac. So when the fighter pilots saw the tic tac, and they're going, yeah, this thing's just moving, but it shows no exhaust. Well, the neat thing about hydrogen is the exhaust of hydrogen is infrared A and infrared B waves, the same stuff that gives us sunburns. It's light. So you're not going to see an exhaust from hydrogen, because our sun is that exhaust is from fusion with hydrogen. So you're not going to see it. So you're not going to see it, because it's Newton's second or third law: for a reaction, there's a reaction. So something's pushing this way, something's got to be coming out the other way, meaning exhaust. We don't see that. So just a theory, but it's my.
Do you think so? The 37th parallel. Is there a lot of aquifers, or why would there be an attraction to that parallel?
You can hit every major aquifer on the 37th.
Okay,
yeah.
And you think that's the primary?
Oil reserves.
And oil reserves.
And a lot of oil reserves too. Yeah.
Okay.
Matter of fact, people are interested in the Skinwalker Ranch in Utah. That sits on an oil reserve.
Really?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
We had a few people from the show on the last month that were on the cast, and one of them talked about a recent horse mutilation that was near the property. And when you and I were talking the other night, you mentioned you had a recent cattle mutilation case that you couldn't even talk about at the time until you got the case became, I guess, a different status. Is that something you can talk about now?
Yeah, I can now. And only because the sheriff's department, they're being knuckleheads. And so we had on 12/19 of last year, there was a mutilation in Wheaton, Kansas, which is in Pottawatomie County. Okay. And I'm sorry, I had to look down because I pulled that up real quick. And when I found out about it, I contacted the sheriff's department there, and I said, "Hey, I want a copy of the case report, because the local news, I think it was 13 News. I'm trying to read WIBW News from that area had that's how I picked it up, because I have these alerts, internet alerts of anything that might happen." And so when I talked with them originally, I said, "Well, I'd like to see the case report on it." He says, "Well, the case report is still open; it's not closed, so we can't really talk about it." And I said, "Okay." So I talked to the sergeant, one of the sergeants there, and I said, "Well, look, this is why I'm interested." And I told him who I was, and I told him that I've done just tons of these mutilations, and I said, I've worked with other sheriff's departments and law enforcement agencies in the past, helping them understand what's going on, and giving them a heads up of what might be going on, or keep a blind eye or don't keep it a blind's eye, but be aware that it's going to happen again in your area. Be prepared, and this is what you need to look for. And he was listening, but he wasn't really having any of it until I said, "Oh, well, by the way, you're going to have a second mutilation. It's going to be either on the same ranch or or close to the same ranch, and you might even have a third. And he goes, why? I said, because these things usually happen in twos and threes. And he paused and he says, we had a second mutilation. So it wasn't until I told him that all of a sudden everything I've been telling him beforehand, he started going, oh shit, maybe this guy might know something. So then he says, well, we need some time to figure this out. Yeah, it's okay, because it's already happened and there's not much I can do. And I know that a lot of these sheriff's departments, law enforcement agencies are trying to protect the ranchers themselves, from people coming out and bugging them. I mean, I did an investigation a few years ago out of Colorado. There was 5, maybe possibly 6 mutilated cows in Texas. And I got the opportunity. I tracked down the actual deputy who ran the investigation, and I talked with her. And we had 2 or 3 great conversations that lasted for a half hour and explained a bunch of things to her. And she was going to get me the case reports. And then the sheriff came and shut everybody down and ordered everybody not to talk about it. Now, because I got terminated from Colorado, from the El Paso County Sheriff's Department over a horse mutilation, I understood what was going on. I didn't want to put her job in jeopardy like I lost mine. I lost a volunteer job, big deal. I didn't have a salary. I didn't have a pension. I didn't have anything, so I didn't care. So I when I talked to the guy, I said, well, can you call us back sometime in February? Give us a month to figure out what's going on, because they're perplexed. They really have no idea what's going on. So I got a hold beginning of the month, and they didn't get back to me, and I called them again, and they didn't get back to me. And then I went through the deputy or the department that actually puts out the case reports, and I talked to them, and they said, well, the case report is still open. And I said, oh, that's interesting. Why is it still open? He says, because we're still gathering information. Well, that's a red flag right there. Because when I talked to him at the beginning of the year, they had told me that they had the vets out there, the animal, both animals were taken to the vet. They were waiting for the information coming back from the vet, a cause of death, and and that was over a month ago. And they were looking at so he told me in February that they're still waiting for information, but from where? Right. Now, every animal that I've ever taken to a veterinary clinic, I had information like the next day. Even blood, analysis of blood was a week, and that's just me, just some goofy guy out there, but not law enforcement, which would be faster. So it tells me something else is going on over there. And so I'm going to have to bug them again here.
Yeah, so you can get up
back
there
from London next week, see what's going on. Maybe they lost another animal. And now I do know in some of the cases that I've done in the past with other law enforcement agencies that they're scared. They don't know what's going on. They're afraid. I mean, because it's, law enforcement needs to be there to protect people. But how do you protect someone from something, or from something, or, that you know nothing about, that you have no clue? And for all I know, maybe someone in the federal government popped up and ordered them to be quiet too, because that's happened. I think that's what happened here in Texas a couple of years ago when they had the 5 mutilations. Someone stepped in from our federal government and said, hey, and I do know the case here in Texas. I was working with another investigator when I was in Colorado. The investigator was here in Texas, and we found out that after the mutilations, there was 2 Air Force trainers out of, I don't know the name of the base, but it's in the Gulf here in Texas, that just happened to be on training maneuvers in the same area where the mutilations occurred a couple days later. Now, she was able to pick it up on Flight Tracker, and I have Flight Tracker on my phone too, so I could see the airplanes, and it said they were trainers. Well, if they're trainers, then they're obviously out there just training, but why were they circling in an area that was directly over for the mutilations? Coincidence? Or are they actual flight trainers that are equipped to do their own investigations? Because I know for a fact that in a lot of the cases, of my mutilation cases, a helicopter will show up
Right.
afterwards. And it happened in Missouri, and it happened in Illinois, and it happened in Colorado a couple of times. Matter of fact, the one case where the two horses were mutilated, where I lost my job, there was a helicopter that hovered over that area, military helicopter. And what scared the hell out of her was it was a gunship, and she could see like missiles. That's what she told me. It was that low to the ground, and it was armed.
You know, have you ever? I thought I heard a case where a lady saw her and her daughter, I think, were in a car, saw this craft, and it was abducting a cow. Like, have you had anybody claim to actually see a craft abduct a cow?
Yeah, actually I have. So I met someone where I bought my Harley, and he goes, "My dad's got this crazy story he's told us a couple of years ago." And I said, and the whole family knows about it. I said, "Okay, what was it?" Well, so what happened is they were in the San Luis Valley, which is close to well, by the UFO watchtowers out that way, and the sand dunes. So he saw what appeared to be a UFO, and he grabbed his camera and he was filming it, and he saw it lift a cow up, and he was like in shock. So the only people he told was his immediate family. But it just after he told his immediate family, someone had broken into his house and took the camera, and so he had no evidence. Yeah, but this was after the fact. He told his wife and his kids, and his kids were older. So I can't imagine that he would lie to his own family, because I asked him, I said, your own dad? He goes, no, he was dead serious. He was scared and he was telling us, and you could clearly see that this is what he saw. And so I need to talk to your dad. And he says, I'll see what I can do. And unfortunately, having his house violated, someone coming in while he was gone and going through and finding his camera and taking his shit, it scared him. So he says, no, I don't want anything to do with this.
Nothing to do with it anymore. Well,
it's funny. I was going to say, I had one rancher.
Yeah.
I did one rancher in a little town called San Luis, Colorado, who had a mutilation case, and he was afraid also of someone in the government coming. And I kid you not, I had to interview him over a cell phone, sitting in my truck, looking at him while he was looking at me from the window of his house. He wouldn't come out of his house and walk over. I just sat in front of his house in my truck. I drove all the way to San Luis Valley, which is like 2-3 hours away. And I interviewed him on my cell phone, looking at him while he stayed in his house. That's how scared he was.
Well, I get it. I mean, but I guess before we wrap, how many cattle mutilations cases have you looked at or investigated? Rough ballpark.
I don't know, hundreds. I don't want to say thousands, but it's over 100, just because I've seen so many, and then I've also done them after the fact too.
Okay.
Just to compare notes. So I've seen so many different cases that I've seen enough that I've learned, at least in my cases and some other cases that were near Colorado, that all the animals were lying east to west, which was part of the 37th parallel, because it travels. I had one case, Walsenburg, was it? Where there was 8 mutilations in 3 different ranches, all within about a week's time. They were all lying on the same side. I think it was the left side. Hoping it was the left side. And they were all facing east to west. Only one wasn't that way because the rancher moved them. And I asked him, okay, before you've turned him over and moved him, where was he? He goes, oh, he's facing that way, west, east to west. So that's where that also solidified that 37th degree latitude theory, that why are they pointing east to west? You know,
And it's always the case, you're saying?
every one of my cases, every one of my cases,
Out of hundreds.
it's always been. Even I did. Well, there was a case that was outside of Rachel, Nevada, off of where Area 51 is. It was on the extraterrestrial, off the extraterrestrial highway. The first thing I thought, well, was hit by a truck or something out there, but it wasn't. Because they said it was just off the road, but it wasn't that far off the road. It was, that close to the road. It was a little further away. And they sent me pictures and as opposed to where the highway was, and I looked on a map and it was east to west. And I'm thinking, oh, okay, that's interesting.
So,
Yeah.
okay, so hundreds of cases investigated, and beyond that, you've looked at other cases and research cases. You've got farmers that are scared, farmers like my uncle who. He's seen dead cows before for decades, and every type of manner that a cow can die. This was something completely anomalous. No tracks in the snow, no blood. You're talking about them being abducted, having their organs taken out, blood drained and put back near another spot. Many times there's energy detected in the spot they're put back. And in some cases, you've got black helicopters, some reports, no sound at all. Grand finale question for you. Having said that, I've never talked to anybody other than when I was a kid and heard my uncle. You've talked to hundreds of people. What do you think is going on? What is Chuck Zukowski's grand theory about what is going on with cattle mutilations?
Originally we had touched base on the hybrid thing, because it's always about the blood. I can't leave that out, because there's been way, way too many cases where people have seen what they think are alien hybrids. And there was actually, I had an experience where, I'm not saying that was the case, but I had lectured in Denver, and after the fact, I had walked back, after I'd lectured on Roswell, I had walked back to pick up my laptop, and put it back away and stuff. And people had left. They wanted to talk to me, so I was by myself. And then two people walked up to me. It was a male and female. They were exactly the same height, and they had the darkest, bluest eyes that I've ever seen. And I don't know if I was imagining it or not, but it just seemed like maybe their eye sockets were just a little further back, not like alien stuff, but just kind of further back. But they kind of reminded me of Edgar Winter, from the Edgar Winter. Yeah, kind of remind me, not albino, but kind of very, very light powdery skin, but they were exactly the same height. So I figured, okay, well, they're twins, and she didn't say anything. And the guy said, he goes, really good lecture. What else? He said, you're right on target, and then turned around and left. Something like that. He didn't say those exact words. He basically said what I was saying was correct. And this had to do with Roswell. And then they just turned around and left. And I go, okay, maybe the people are just screwing with me. But I have heard reports from other people that I've investigated their sightings, their UFO sightings, where they've seen similar people like this. And maybe some people may think they're MIBs, or maybe they're hybrids. So the blood thing, I have to keep it open, and then there's other reasons that if you look at the Dulce files, and in the Dulce base, supposedly aliens are using blood as nourishment. That's because they don't have a digestive system like us. They use like osmosis, they kind of suck it into their system. And if you've ever seen the Dulce papers and read them, they talk about, there's like these aliens that are floating in vats of blood. As crazy as that sounds, you still have to kind of leave that open too. That would follow the whole blood theory too. And then the cuts on the animals, a lot of times the cuts are in areas where there's glands, the glandular areas. So in cases like that, I would think that there's some studying involved. Like, they have the blood for whatever they need it for, and then they have the glandular area where the cuts were to sample certain glands, right? And it's always they love the digestive tract for whatever reason. They love it. And look at cows. Maybe they like cows better because what do they have, 5 or 6 stomachs?
Right.
Yeah. So maybe, the digestive tract of a cow is a way lot different than ours and horses. So they have a better filtering system in their digestive tract for things that they eat off the ground better. It's interesting because it's funny that when I was in Missouri investigating Marley Wood's investigation, they've had mutilations there too, and ghost sightings and shadow people and all kinds of stuff going on over there. I talked to the one guy where there was a mutilation, and he showed me where it occurred. And it occurred right next to the fence of a large, like a corral, right? A large area that they would bring the animals in and the animals out there. And this was the area where it was found. And after they pulled the animal out, the cows that they were bringing in to corral them there, they would walk around that area where the animal had died, or was mutilated. And in one case, they walked the other way and pushed the fence down. They refused to walk through that circle, right? And I think it was a circle. I think Nancy Talbert might have actually investigated that one, come to think of it. But the dogs could care less. His dogs were running all over the place and running all through it. He says, so whatever's there, the cows know, and the dogs don't care. So it's kind of interesting. They had a mutilation case in Colorado where there was a bull that was sitting in a circle, right? And right before I got to, a couple hours right before, a bear had got to the carcass and pulled the animal or the carcass out of the circle before it started to chew on the carcass. It did not. I mean, usually they would just right there, but you could see the drag marks where it pulled it, and then as soon as it was out of the circle, that's where it laid, and you could see where it was eating on it. So the bear picked up something from that circle too. Interesting stuff.
So sounds like you're leaning on hybrid, probably, because that's for my money. I'm just trying to figure out. Well, first off, let's establish non-human intelligence in your mind. This is non-human.
Yeah, I think I'm leaning on a couple of multiples. I mean, if this is a very intelligent species that's doing this, there may be other reasons they need that too. Let's say, we can use it for hybrids. We can use this for nourishment. We can use this for whatever. But it all still points to extraterrestrial. So at this point, it's funny because some people will ask me, well, how many species do you think we have of extraterrestrials? And I go, I just want to find one. I don't care if there's, some people say there's 50, some people say there's 3, whatever. I say, I just want to find one. So I do know from my point of view, that it appears to be extraterrestrial and they're more interested in the blood. I can only hypothesize or summarize, why the blood, based on other reports and other stories from other investigators and like I said, with Dulcie and the hybrid whole thing, and say, well, maybe it is. Well, maybe that. I can't tell you for a fact, but I can tell you it's all about the blood, and they like the blood for whatever reason. Not just cows, horses too, and other animals, so interesting stuff.
It is always interesting.
We're still learning. We're still learning.
And it's still going on too. As people, it's not like a 70s phenomenon that went away. It's been going on for decades. So, well, you're the guy. We would like to check back in with you or check back in with me when you get some cool reports, and we'll have you back on.
And we haven't even talked about Roswell yet. Yeah. See that little piece right there?
What is that?
That's a piece of debris from the Roswell debris site. That's another one of my investigations. I started off doing a Roswell investigation when I first started doing this. And so I knew Walter Hott, and met Walter Hott and Glenn Dennis. Glenn Dennis gave me the GPS coordinates to the debris site. It was basically GPS coordinates to a BLM marker and then told me how to get to the debris site. And back in 2000, when I was working with the Sci-Fi Channel, after they were done shooting, my sister and I went back to the site and we did our own dig, and we found a piece of metal there. And I had to analyze it. It was aluminum alloy. Well, since then, I've been working with Frank Kibler, who lives in Roswell. We've gone back to the site a few times, and we found a lot of these things. But now, because of today's technology and lab results, we were able to identify that this little piece, I guess, kind of hard to see. I don't know if you can see it, but this little piece of metal inside here, it's an aluminum alloy that is not registered anywhere in the United States. So we've had 4 labs in 4 different states come up with the same conclusion that it's an aluminum alloy and it's not registered. Now, it falls in our periodic table, all the elements in there, but it's not something you can buy. And we found pieces from 12 inches to 2 inches deep. So it's been underground for a while in some cases, which would lead back to the 1947. So all 4 labs, well, I take it back. 3 of the 4 labs stated that whatever caused that little debris to be there, it was very, very explosive in nature because parts of the aluminum alloy were melted. And when you look at it under a microscope, there's little explosive tears and rips at 10 to 15 microns. That's how tiny some of these rips are. So it was just a phenomenal explosion that caused that. So
you may be
cool.
sitting on some actual Roswell site debris.
Well, it is. Well, it is. I guarantee it's Roswell debris, and it's UFO because I can guarantee, because it's unidentified, because 3 of the 4 labs said that the only way that this could happen was it had to explode above the ground. Yeah. So we know if whatever exploded was flying. We have more than enough evidence. And matter of fact, L.A. Marzullo, are you familiar with him?
Yeah, I know who he is. Yep. Yeah,
so I gave a piece to L.A. Marzullo for a 2 DVD set that he has on Roswell, and he's had the analysis done, and it all matches the analysis that I've had done and Fred Kibler's had done. So California, Texas, New Mexico, and Colorado, all 4 states, all 4 different labs, same result, non-registered aluminum alloy. So that's awesome stuff.
You got Roswell crash sitting in your office there.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, now, granted, I can't guarantee that it's extraterrestrial. I can't guarantee that, but I can guarantee that it's in the same location where eyewitnesses say, that's something skipped. It's a skip site, not a crash site where it's skipped. I interviewed Fawn Fritz years and years ago, who was Mac Brazel's granddaughter. And she says, this is where my, grandpa said that happened. And then with Alien Highway, we interviewed, I just forgot his name. But he was one of his brother was with Mac Brazel afterwards and saw the debris. And same place, so we know we're in the same place where it happened, and we found the debris. It's so cool.
That is very cool. I wish I could find something like that.
Well, I tried for years. I found the first piece. We found it during an actual archaeology dig.
Yeah.
And I had my sister there. She was sifting, and I was digging, and I was doing strip digging. I went back multiple times with my metal detector, and I couldn't find it. Frank Kembler's metal detector was picking it up. And I said, well, what's the difference between my metal detector and yours? Well, Frank Kembler used to metal detect for gold nuggets, and it's a different frequency for gold than mine. So I went out and bought a $450, $500 metal detector that looks for gold, because that frequency to find gold is different. And within 15 minutes of me out there, I found a piece.
Oh, so wow.
That's all I needed to know. Years ago, I could have had more pieces. But you learn,
Yeah. Oh, look, you're a go-getter, man. Your energy and drive to get out there and investigate all this is pretty wild. Well, listen, man, it's good to have you on. I also want to tell people, watch. It's still out there, Alien Highway.
It's still out there. I think it's airing in London now. I think in the UK.
Yeah. I was on an airplane, took a trip to Arizona to see my mom about a year ago, and I just loaded them all up, and so I watched them all again on there. But it's a great series. It sucks that they canceled it. Keep us posted.
Yeah.
I'll check in with you again.
Yeah, the cancellation was just a reorg. Scripps came in and bought out this, part of Discovery Network, and that always happens when there's one company comes in. We're going to see that now with Paramount, right? Paramount buying Warner Brothers, and I've been watching that really closely because the 37th Parallel book that came out about was I sold the life rights to New Line Cinema for a movie way back in the day, and the script was already written on that. So, if they decide, and I was afraid that if it goes to Netflix, they already decided to do it. They may gender swap, they may do all kinds of stuff because Netflix is very high and still into DEI stuff, but Paramount isn't, and so now that WB is Paramount, they're going to stay with movie stuff. So I'm kind of excited. Maybe in the future they'll relook at that. Yeah,
I'd love to see that. I'd love to see that.
I would too.
Yeah, for sure. Well, listen, man, it's been great talking to you. I love talking to you the other day. We could go on for hours, but we'll have you back.
Oh yeah, we got other stuff to talk about. Yeah, you want to do it again?
We'll reload it. We'll reload it.
Yeah.
You got a ton under your belt, so we'll definitely do this again soon. But it's great talking with you, Chuck. And until then, keep rocking.
Yeah, thank you. And if anybody wants any information, it's ufonut.com.
There you go. That's it. ufonut.com. Check it out. Thanks, Chuck.
All right, thank you.